All good.
Amazing. Well, so excited to be speaking with Liz and Ryan. We've known each other, which is a little bit crazy, for a few years now. Never met Liz in person.
Oh,
Met
that's great.
Ryan, but
Hopefully this summer.
soon to meet in person. And for the people that, are tuning in and listening to us, Ryan and Liz are going to be talking a little bit more about what they do, their careers in the licensing world, working with brands, with estates, with celebrities alike, and now working for our partners in our portfolio of artists. So we're going to delve a little bit into what licensing is, what it entails, maybe why is it different from artists as opposed to brands, as opposed to maybe celebrities, and all amazing things. Really thinking about how artists, as they work and they build their portfolio of work or their careers, can think about other ways in which they can leverage that creativity as well. So I want to jump in by asking maybe Liz and Ryan to not only tell us a little bit more about Renaissance licensing, but also your backgrounds as well. So maybe Ryan, you can get us started.
Sure, be happy to. Thanks for having us, Raquel. Always a pleasure to chat. And yeah, eventually the three of us will be together in the same room at some point. Sure. So Renaissance Licensing is a relatively new agency. Liz and I formed it at the end of 2023. We were former colleagues. We worked together for, I guess, 7 years now. It's been a while. So we took the opportunity with some career changes in place to launch our own agency. So we have a partnership with 4Art that you mentioned. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. We have a partnership with music representation, and then we also represent some clients directly, such as the estate of Steve McQueen, one of our big celebrity clients. So I got my start in the licensing business in 2007. I started working for the Ernest Hemingway estate. Did a lot of different things there, leveraged that to move into more of the home furnishing space when I worked for Nautica, back when they were owned by VF Corporation. Spent a lot of time in men's apparel, home furnishings, as I mentioned, furniture, textiles, all of that. From there, I went over to Wayfair, worked on the Dwell Studio brand for a while, and then sort of returned to my roots in deceased celebrity licensing or celebrity licensing at Greenlight / Ben Group. And that's where I met Liz and got me to where I am today. So that's
Yeah.
my quick
That
story.
sounds like an incredible journey. And I have so many questions already, but we'll leave that for later. And how about you, Liz? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so I got started in licensing at Disney Consumer Products. What better place to launch your licensing career? I lived in LA for a little bit and was on the food, health, and beauty team and met some incredible people that I'm still in touch with today. It was such a great experience. And when I moved back to New York, I worked at Beanstalk Group, which was really for corporate brand licensing, and was there for a short time, and then went over to Greenlight, where I had been for about 14 years. So a nice wide array of experience as well. And what was fun at Greenlight specifically was having a lot of these deceased celebrity clients where you had got a lot of experience with different categories. So it wasn't, it's pigeonholed in something specific, but it's also really good to have Ryan on my team because he is so knowledgeable when it comes to the home space, which is its like own world. And Ryan can talk your ear off about retail. So if you ever have any retail specific questions, he's the guy. So yeah, and thrilled to be have our own agency now. It's been so much fun, and we're so happy to work with 4Art and all the wonderful artists that you guys have.
Thank you so much. And likewise, we're so excited. I guess my first question is coming into licensing, trying to understand it better. I feel like there's, at least from the art world perspective or artists, which is where my experience lies, that licensing is this kind of like whenever there's a collaboration happening or whenever someone wants to do something, they'll send you an agreement, collaboration, and you'll get some royalties. And that's basically what people understand by licensing. But I've learned through you and through conversations and through everything that we do for our partners that it's such a world and it's an industry on its own. It's so much more than just a simple agreement. It's so much more than just like a one-off collaboration. And art is usually between fashion and art or the luxury industry and art. So let's start with the basics. What is licensing for you guys in very general terms? And then we'll go into the specifics. Ryan, do you want to
Sure.
take a hand at it?
I mean, you are right. At the end of the day, it's an agreement between two parties. Someone pays a fee to use someone else's intellectual property. So that's just the very basic sort of nuts and bolts of it. But, for us and what we do for our clients, it's really about protecting and expanding upon their legacy, their body of work, their contribution, if you will, to whether it's the art scene, the Hollywood arena, the music industry. So it's about taking their body of work and through the magic of licensing and working with different brands, different manufacturers, different licensees, bringing them to a whole new set of consumers, a whole new set of fans that didn't even know they were fans yet. So that's really sort of how we look at it from the Renaissance perspective and the clients that we're working for. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, the licensing industry is a $350 billion industry. It's huge. And like you said, it's its own world. And before I started at Disney, like you don't even know what licensing is. Like
Yeah, you
the
don't
goal,
know.
right, is like that people don't know who's making the stuff. Like it all, like that's why the branding has to be same across. So obviously collaborations are a little bit different when it's, specific brand collaborating with another artist or celebrity or whatnot. But if it's straight licensing, everything has to be really like the same, labels have to look the same, and you don't know who's making it. And that's really like the beauty of licensing as well. So it's a very interesting. I still don't think my mom understands what it is, like it's like you don't think about it if you're not in the industry. And I've actually ruined some of my friends who like to shop at TJ Maxx because they think they're getting a deal. And I'm like, no, that stuff's made for TJ Maxx most of the time,
Right,
not
right,
all the
right.
time.
So what you're saying is we have collaborations, which also required like some part of licensing, right? But then you have strictly licensing deals where in this case, we're talking about an artist, right? So in that case, you're licensing your intellectual property, you're not collaborating to design a new product as well, because I think that is an important difference to point out.
Mm.
Because a lot of artists, especially those that are currently living and working as well, they get very excited because they think or they hear licensing and they feel like it's all going to be very creative, very collaborative between brand and artist. And it turns out that brands don't have time. There's tons of levels of approvals you have to go through, and they just much rather grab the artwork that is already created and design themselves. So walk us a little bit through that process on the traditional licensing. How does it work more specifically?
Yeah, so there are so many manufacturers for so many different types of products. So if you're an artist and you want to do t-shirts, you have an agency like us that goes out and approaches, multiple different manufacturers, and these manufacturers supply to different types of retailers all across the world. Some focus on mass, some focus on specialty, department store, or some can really distribute to all of the retailers. So like they'll have different, levels of product depending on who they're supplying to. And so, you hope that they like the art that you have to provide. And if so, you sign the deal and they'll make the product. They will send, samples to make sure the quality is right. And that, especially with artists, I know artists are probably very meticulous and definitely want to approve every single stage. So we have to make sure that we find those partners that the manufacturers that are willing to really go through that, and if an artist isn't happy with something, that they will go and make those changes.
Okay, that's really interesting. And does it vary depending on the category? So there's different categories, right? As you were saying, Ryan and Liz, your experiences are very complementary because you come from two different sets of categories within this world. You, Ryan, from home. So tell us a little bit more about if it varies depending on the category. I'm sure in home you have more like textiles versus maybe in gifting or souvenir or even something like kitchenware could be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that, excuse me, as a consumer, you don't always think about, but
Mhm.
every category of product has their own cadence in terms of product development cycle. So something like home furnishings, if you're talking about your bedding, your bath, those types of products, there's really 2 seasons a year. You know, there's the spring summer collection, there's the autumn winter collection, and that's when the stores refresh, and those are the big buys when they come in. So it's really twice a year. Now, of course, there's always product flowing. We live in a 24/7 news cycle, 24/7 shopping cycle. So you can always find newness, but generally speaking, something like home furnishings, you have 2 seasons a year. When you move into something like apparel, you know, they're getting drops on the floor every month. So they'll have 4 seasons, but they'll drop something every month. So you have to be aware of where you are in the product development cycle. Then you have something like timepieces. It takes 2 years to do a new watch. If you're talking about fast fashion, it could take you 4 months to print a new t-shirt. So you really need to know the intricacies, not only the players, but the speed to market, what's going to be necessary, how long that's going to take when you start thinking about licensing across product categories.
Mhm. So then what steps do you guys take to understand the goals of a brand that you're working with? Brand, we mean like an artist, an estate, a celebrity, a music artist. To understand the goals, where do you start? Like, how do you begin when you get this wonderful body of work, right? How do you start making connections into what categories make sense for that? In that case, we do a lot of that with our artists, right? We're always thinking, what do they stand for? What their values are? What are the connections we can make? But yeah, how do you even begin to think about something?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just getting to know the artist, or, you know, in our relationship, you're really knowledgeable of the artists that you have, and understanding their goals as to, like, do they want a new consumer? Are they okay going into luxury? Are they open to doing, you know, one thing that's so wonderful about working with living artists is that they can create new stuff all the time. So it's like, maybe they've got a few collections of work that they really want to keep for themselves or for luxury brands, but like if we get a Walmart deal, they can create something unique. So it's really just about understanding what their goal is as an artist. Like some artists don't want to, go into mass market, and because they think that might ruin their street cred or whatever for people that are buying their stuff in the galleries. So, but some might not care. So it's really just, finding out and drilling in with them, and then hopefully building relationships with them, and like, so that they're comfortable when we present deals to them, and that, we only present deals that we believe in too. We're not gonna just send something that we, just for the money, right? Like it has to make sense. And that's something that I think is really important to me and Ryan, is to make sure that anything we are presenting and going out and pitching, it is really because that's what we see as a goal for the artist program.
Absolutely. It's like I always say, I wouldn't do anything I wouldn't buy myself. Which
Yeah.
that's an issue I have. Everything we put out, I want to buy everything. I spend all my money in our products and our collaborations. But I don't know if that's a good piece of advice for any entrepreneur. So when talking to a brand, when talking to a retailer or a manufacturer, and we touched a little bit about this at the beginning of the conversation, but what is the value? What is the benefit of them incorporating another brand, another artist, another celebrity? And there's levels to it. You have people that are very famous, have tons and tons of followers, so maybe the value there is exposure to that market. But are there any other benefits to licensing and collaborating in a product?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it benefits both sides. It benefits the artist or the licensor, as well as the brand or the retailer or the manufacturer or the licensee. What you're really doing when you sign a license agreement is you're getting something that's probably going to be exclusive for you, right? You're the only one that gets this artist artwork. You're the only one that's going to be able to put it on a t-shirt or a watch or a textile. So that's going to be your point of differentiation in the marketplace. And that's really going to help you out. And you're ideally going to have more sales as a result of it. You know, on the other side of things, the artist is going to get exposure to maybe a new consumer base, maybe a new fan base. Maybe they're going to be able to talk about their art in a way that they weren't able to when it was just in a gallery. They may be able to take elements of their art, right? If they're working with a licensee that likes certain elements, or maybe they want to recolor it, or maybe their vision is different for watches than it is for t-shirts. And so they're able to really play with things in different mediums, reach new consumers. And, you know, at the end of the day, if it's done right, everyone generates some revenue from it.
Mm-hmm. I think
Absolutely.
also brands like working with artists, they like to sort of, like Ryan said, have a point of differentiation, but it's also just like the new, like
Yeah.
maybe they're going to find somebody before someone else does, right? And you like want to get in on it quickly and help, you know, promote new young talent also. And like, you know, how much of the same stuff is out there, you know, like especially in the art licensing world. I mean, wonderful artists, but like, you know, Keith Haring, Basquiat, like there's so much of that already out there. Like, why not choose an artist that is unique and has, you know, hasn't really been tapped yet?
Mhm. Absolutely. So part of what I always think is the relationship between the licensing efforts that we do and that you guys work so hard to do with the non-licensing stuff, exhibitions, films, anything else going on in the artist's life, right? Because if you're a living artist and you're active at it, I think the work of the licensing team is going to be a lot easier because we have things to show and expose and talk about. Have you, and then we have deceased artists, right? We have artists that are no longer alive. Do you correlate, is there a correlation between people being interested in doing collaborations and the licensing work, when the artist is extremely active as well, or it doesn't matter, it matters a little, matters a lot? What do you guys think?
I think it might depend on the artist.
Okay.
You know, I think I mean, any kind of exposure helps. And, you know, and if the artist is exhibiting, I mean, anything that's like on film, like a docu-series or anything like that, I think is, you know, certainly helps because then you go out and you pitch and you can say they're going to be, you know, doing this docu-series or, you know, whatever. But exhibitions and things like they're helpful just because it's like someone's out there and they're, you know, they're talking and, you know, assuming these artists are at their openings and are always able to talk about stuff. But I think if you're a bigger artist, you know, yes, being more active, I think even gets people might help as well. So I don't know. I think it might depend, like, you know, on I think just generating new art and
Mm.
being part of the process. Like some of the artists that you work with, like I love that they have ideas that they want us to pitch because sometimes it's like, oh, that's great, you know, thank you for sending that piece of art so we can go out specifically and like talk about that. So
Mhm.
that's really helpful.
Yeah, there's no lack of ideas for our partners. We're idea center. And I love what you said because it's not just grabbing whatever art or artists we collaborate with and grabbing a product and saying, oh, let's just paste this art into this product and voila. One of the things that I stand for is the product needs to come from the artist as well. So the fact that our artists and our artist partners and estates, the ideas come from them as well, I think that makes it so much more valuable
Yeah.
when the product comes too.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking with a potential partner now that for one of your artists, you know, and they're like, can they come and maybe paint a mural if we do something? And it's like, yeah, like how cool is that to be able to like offer that to partners? You know, it's definitely like a unique
It's a
thing.
different experience. So one of the other things I heard from what you said, Liz, was the what's most important, I guess, when we're talking about an artist is not how active they are. The PR is amazing, it helps, but get to work, create more. you know? The more we have to show, the more we have to show that you're active and you're creative and you're passionate about your work. That's what really resonates with potential business partners. And I think that's true for any industry
Yeah.
in reality. But I don't know, do you have anything else to add to that point? Specifically, one of the things, and I'll explain a little bit more where I'm going. One of the things that I tell artists all the time when they say, well, what do I need to do to work with forward partners? And I tell them, you need to get to a point where you're still growing as an artist, but you're no longer trying to figure out who you are and what your voice is as an artist. Basically, you need to know who you are and what you're going to do. We can work with artists that are one day they have one aesthetic and they love as one thing and one theme and one topic, and they have a set of values, and then the next month they change. So your work can evolve with you, but you already need to know a little bit about yourself in order to go through this more commercial process. Is that true for other brands that you work with as well? I guess not only artists, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're searching for partnerships in the licensing world, we put a lot of emphasis on authenticity and making sure that the values align, that they're signing up because they have a shared commitment to those values. So, I mean, from a value perspective, from an aesthetic perspective, if I go out, sign a deal because X artist is just a floral machine and we can do florals all day long, and then all of a sudden next month after the deal is signed, they're only doing moonscapes, that's going to make it's going to make our licensees real upset because they're not getting any more flowers. So it's definitely important that there's a cohesive vision, and not only does the artist have that, but they know what they want to do with it, right? And they're not going to change their mind or move it to something else, or say, oh no, I don't want to do mass anymore. I want to do luxury, or I don't want to do t-shirts, because these deals have a long gestation period. As we talked about, there's different product development cycles. So once you're into the process and you're signing up and executing contracts, you really need to make sure that it's what you want.
Exactly. And that when the product comes out, it's something that you want to stand for, right? And you don't change your mind because your art suddenly decided to change as well. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about artist legacies, celebrity legacies, which is something that you guys dealt with a lot in your work at Greenlight, in Ben Labs, and then Ryan, you also worked with legacies before. So when we work from the 4AP perspective, when we work with artists and artist legacies is similar but very different types of works. Usually an artist estate or an artist legacy comes from a deceased artist or a deceased celebrity. They have left an immense, I guess, group of intellectual property assets. It can be in the form of music, it can be in the form of film, of books, of art, of whatever it is. In our case, usually it's left to a group of people, most likely the family, in some cases, the legal team for when they were alive, or estate, I guess, advisors in some cases. But then we go in, and we help operate and we help transform and grow this artist estate or artist legacy. The community component is really important for us because in order to continue to operate and grow the legacy, you need to continue to build the people that follow that legacy and that are very passionate about the work that this artist did when they were alive too. So would love for you to talk a little bit more about the work that you currently do with legacies and that you did before too. I don't know if you have some examples that you guys can talk about as well, but what does it entail to, from a licensing perspective, operate and be kind of like the gatekeepers of that world that was created by these people when they were alive?
Yeah, I mean, that was, like you said, what we did at our former company, and right now with our client, Steve McQueen, who was also at our former company. I think when you have someone like that who has been, an icon for so long and has such a large fan base, and when you're working with the son, it is so important to understand the background and the vision and the man of who he was. And so things we've been super successful with Steve McQueen because most things we do have just been super authentic. Like the Persol sunglasses, he wore them. The Barber jacket, he wore it. Triumph motorcycles, he rode them. Everything is very on brand. And the minute sure, we do t-shirts and things like that, but the minute you do something, and I don't know that we have, frankly, but if we did something that truly fans didn't like, you'd hear about it. And that's one thing that is really wonderful about our client, who's his son, who knew his dad best is him, and it's he is so no, my dad wouldn't have liked that, or it's so great to have someone like him to bounce ideas off of and really understand who he was as a person so that we can just make sure that things we're doing are as on brand as we can be. And I think protecting legacies is really important because they're not here to protect themselves. So you have to make sure that who you're working with, really cares. And we've worked with some other estates that were really unique, like the Martin Luther King estate. I mean, that was, that's a tricky, he's one of the most iconic figures of all time, but it's, you can't just go do silly things, right? He's really stand for something. And so they do such a wonderful job that that estate to keep his legacy alive and to really make sure things are very, within the scope of who Dr. King was. So it, varies by person, obviously, and for what they stood for and what their estates are, stand for, basically what the goal is. A lot of estates have different goals, Some of it is to keep the name and the name out there. Some of it's to make money. Some of it's, combination. I don't know, Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a little bit of everything. And it's really, again, going back, listening to your client, what is it you want to do? I think there's also a good bit of education, depending on the sophistication. I'm sure you've experienced this, Raquel. Folks might think, oh, every picture of the artist I own. Well, no, copyright is different than personality rights, and you might own the rights to the work, but not necessarily the photos of him or her next to the work. And so there's a bunch of different intricacies from a legal perspective that clients aren't always thinking about. And when you start to get into the nuts and bolts of how you build a program, how you expand it, you have to look at what's available. We talked before about having more to offer to potential partners. So it's really about understanding, educating, and working collaboratively to figure out, is this a money-making venture? Is this about keeping the name relevant? Is it about, making sure that no one else does it? So it's very,
that's a good point too.
Bespoke process.
Yeah. The trademark issue is that would be a whole other conversation, Raquel, but it's yeah, to Ryan's point, if someone could go and trademark a name that if Ryan was a famous guy, Ryan Kernan, and he didn't trademark his name in apparel, someone else could go do it and make money, and there's not much you can do. So there are a lot of
which
things
is
like
an
that.
important part of organizing the estate, right? If it was not done while they were living, it's important to have all these assets. They're assets that usually belong to an estate, an organization, a nonprofit, a for-profit, whatever it is. But something as simple as a website is so important for an estate to have because it's some sort of presence that tells people we're still here. You can't mess with us. And if you do, there's someone behind this legacy that is going to deal with it. Basically. So not just for marketing and community building purposes, all these little steps that you take are so important.
Brand protection is the term we use a lot, and it can take a lot of different forms. It can go after someone who's using the work without permission. It can mean registering trademarks proactively. It can mean granting licenses for certain categories or certain territories to make sure you're covered. There's a lot that goes into it. You really have to think about the various, use of the work, use of the name, use of a photograph, and what that means for the legacy.
Absolutely. So I guess my last questions around legacy or working with legacies is you tend to have an excitement, and I would also have an excitement if my father, my mother, my grandparents, my great-grandparents had been amazing artists or amazing celebrities that contributed so much to the creative world. So oftentimes what we see is that there's so much excitement to do everything, right? And they go out, the legacy holders go out, they license their work, they do tons of different things. And you were saying, Liz, like it can get a little bit oversaturated. So is there a strategy in the work of, if you work with very famous artists, you could do hundreds and thousands of different things at the same time. But from your experience, is it good to almost do it in milestones a little bit, or steps, or is it okay to go out and just license as much as possible?
I mean, I definitely think there's like a strategy that you have to put into place. And either, you know, a lot of the times you can start in one like tier, and then you can wait and go to a different tier. There's also ways of doing sub brands. So like, you know, let's say someone has a very unique style of work that's only for luxury, but then you can create a sub brand where it's like, you know, other work and that's for mass or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely like you don't want to just go out and throw like darts at the wall and like see what's out. You know, a lot of times too, you start with apparel if you can. That's like a really good way to get in. And because I think a lot of other categories, right, Ryan? Like look at like, oh, is it doing well in apparel? You know, it'll
That's
likely
interesting.
transition.
That's interesting. Like the industry itself is looking at what's going on. Is it selling? Is it not? Is it being talked about in
Hmm
the licensing industry specifically?
hmm
It's also important that you're not granting licenses. So if you're saturating the market, they're going to compete against each other.
hmm
And if you've got, you know, the t-shirt maker selling to this retailer and this other t-shirt maker selling the same thing, maybe it's a little different. Like you don't want them competing against each other. It may be, you know, legal and permitted based on the contract, but it's not always good business, and it doesn't
hmm
do anything good for the brand if
hmm
you've got two folks sort of competing to win the price war for the product.
Absolutely.
So you do
And then
need to.
each country is,
Mhm.
sorry. Yeah, like each country is unique too, right? So you could like grant a license for the US, and then you can grant a different license for Europe, and you can do, you know, then you've got Asia. So like you can really segment the market that way as well. And a lot of times when we have programs like with, again, like with Steve McQueen, he's got a bunch of licenses. Not too many, honestly. Like we're pretty, you know, a nice streamlined business, but it's very like specific as to where are they selling, what countries are they selling in, and what are they selling.
But you also don't necessarily need a consistent positioning across all markets. For the most people don't, you know, when they go on vacation to a different country, hit up the stores and go to the mall and do all those things. So you can be, you know, a true luxury brand in one country, and you can be more mass in another country, as long as you have a plan and you've worked it out and you're not, you know, cannibalizing sales, you're making sure that it's very different. You can really live in different parts of the world in different tiers of distribution and price point.
I love what you're saying, Ryan, because it also ties into what Liz was saying of the sub brands, right? In the art world can be almost matched to the luxury world in the sense that not a lot of people buy art, and the art that is bought at a very high level, it's millions and millions of dollars, right? Not a lot of people can actually buy it. So artists are oftentimes very afraid to go or venture into very commercial licensing deals because they feel like that's going to affect the artwork, the sales, right? But what we work on a lot is exactly that. How do you brand it in a way that it does not directly impact your luxury work too? And I guess country dependent too, which is something really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and to finalize, you know, I mean, I've learned so much just from this call. So excited to have you guys. I would love if each of you can talk about so far your favorite deal that you've done that you're allowed to talk about. Maybe the one you had the most fun, or the one that you like the product the most. Take a moment to think about it. But I do want to tell to everyone that listens to Forward Talks, and we so appreciate that this is a long-term process, right? It's not just let's go in, let's do a collaboration and let's get out. It's years and years of work, of relationship building, on figuring out those strategies, what makes sense
Mhm.
for you as a brand, as an artist, as a
I'll
like a
talk about one. And it kind of relates to your world. It's we signed at my former company, Mr. Brainwash, as a
Mhm.
licensee for the rights to Albert Einstein and Charlie Chaplin.
Mm.
And this is going back many years ago. I think that I was one of the first people to grant a license to him for his work. And it's I love it because it's so fun and it's like him using other intellectual property for his art. And that's like another way for artists to think about too, is to if they want to build their names, I mean, sure, they have to, pay royalties, but it's a good way also for them to get out there. So it's like if one of your artists, I feel like maybe one of your artists has worked with like Disney or something, but um, it's a really good way to get out there and like license someone else's IP to include in your IP. And to me, that was a really fun, a fun license to do, and just like seeing him grow as an artist too. Like now he has his own museum in Los Angeles,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
he's just like he's such a personality. He's like, I don't know him personally that well, but his brother works with him, and they're just such like kind people, true mensches, if you know what the term is, and just really like just a fun program to work on.
That's
So
an
hopefully we can find another way to work with them in our new agency.
absolutely. That's an interesting application of an artist licensing
Yeah,
something too, which I guess so many people, as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, they don't know something is being licensed
yeah. And
until they
sometimes artists
discover.
actually don't know that they need to license.
Mhm.
Like art
Yeah.
is one of those tricky worlds, right? But if you're gonna make a bunch of art and sell a bunch of art with someone else's IP in it, you also gotta pay.
Yeah. We're still part of this world. How about you, Ryan?
It's I've done so many different things. Liz and I in our last company we launched sorry, excuse me. This is just funny. We launched HVAC services in the Pacific Northwest under a license. We did all manner of product, but I always found it very interesting that for one of our clients, we got into the restaurant business in three very different ways in three different geographies. So the client had their own sort of fine dining concept restaurant, a couple of them in Switzerland. And then we opened a quick service vegan chain in India. I think we're up to about 10 outlets now. And then there was another operator in the Middle East doing more of a club kind of wouldn't call it fine dining, but just sort of in the shadow of the Burj Khalifa downtown Dubai.
Wow.
So it was all the client's IP, just done in very different ways to serve the local markets. And so I think that's something that is a really good lesson because we tend to think about where we are, how we shop, how we consume, and when we look through the lens of our own biases, and then to get out there and meet people that can take the IP and do such different things with it in the same sort of space is really fascinating to me.
Mhm.
That's amazing. I look forward to visiting. Oh, it's such an interesting way to apply a brand too, right? It's another category. You have hospitality, you even have real estate
Mhm.
there too. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a pleasure working with you both. I know we'll do amazing things, and I hope everyone listening will learn a little bit more about what you guys do.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.